Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Let's Play Warframe. I'm your host with the most, as always, Francois878, and today we're going to be bringing you my Update 15 Megasode, is what I'm going to call it. It's basically going to cover Update 15, 15.1, 15.2, and now 15.3. 15. I sat down to record this episode. I was like, awesome, cool, it's Thursday, there was no update, there's no hotfix, we're good. And then at like 3 o'clock, they're like, oh hey, 15.3, suck it, nerd. I'm like, shit! So now it's 15.3. 15.3 was nothing, though. It was nothing important, though, so it's not as bad as it could have been. It wasn't nothing, but nothing that I felt like I had to actually talk about, so yay! But let's get to the meat. Let's cut the chatter and get to the important stuff, shall we? And the reason this update is coming so late is because there were so many problems with Update 15 initially, and 15.1 and 15.2 in certain aspects, more specifically the syndicates, that I just basically, I took like a 3-week-long break from Warframe. I was playing anything and everything other than Warframe, because Update 15 just was lackluster in my opinion, with the exception of the Archwing stuff. And there were just a lot of stuff that I was excited for, and they just they weren't really up to snuff. I guess I should talk about the gameplay before I go on, well, let me finish that thought. Basically, I couldn't bring myself to record videos. Basically, there was just nothing that had just really wowed me enough to really, get me to make a video. So now I'm kind of making a megasode to get everything I finally have enough that I'm excited about to make something. But the footage you're seeing here is actually from 15.2. It is the introduction to the Infested. It's a quest line that, actually, I believe the entire quest line takes place in Mercury. It's for beginning players. It's basically their introduction to the Infested, which I think is really cool. I mean, for me, obviously, I have all level 30 gear, so it's whatever. I'm just walking through these dudes. Oh, little trick here with Limbo. When you go into the Rift, you drop whatever you're carrying. So, that's fun. Which I was carrying a data terminal and didn't realize it because I hadn't really done a whole lot with Limbo yet. So, but that's fun. But this is the it was a very easy quest, and for most veteran players it won't be very hard. But I think for new players and for people just starting off, this is a real good, kind of introduction to the Infested. Like, the tutorial was an introduction to the Grineer, and see, I go back into the Void with the Cataclysm, and the same thing happens. The Grineer were introduced in the tutorial, and so this is just the kind of the introduction to the Infested, and I think it's a good idea. It's not a hard quest, but it does kind of explain the lore a little bit behind the Infested and why they're there, and it gives them kind of a quote-unquote origin story for this new age. And to me, it just makes me think of them more as the Flood every time they do more stuff with the Infested. Is just the Flood from Halo, guys, just in case I have some people who don't play Halo or never played Halo. They're really similar, and they're getting more and more similar is what it seems like to me, But yeah, I found that it probably was appropriate footage to show off for like a 15 megasode. I was thinking about doing some Archwing stuff, but a lot of the Archwing episodes are a lot of the Archwing. Oh, God, I keep calling them Archwing. Archwing episodes are lots of flying around in space and not really doing much. There's 15 seconds of fighting and then 20 to 40 seconds of flying, so I just decided to go ahead and go with the quest line. But anyways, now that we've spent 15 minutes on nothing, or not 15, 5 minutes, On literally, really nothing. Basically, update 15. This is the huge major update. It added the Arcwing stuff, which put the Tenno in space, which is an obvious progression, and it was the thing that I was probably the least excited about in the beginning. But it's, after a week or so, it was the thing I was most excited about. I thought it was very well done. Buggy as hell, but I mean, it's a whole new way to play the game. So that's obvious. That's going to happen. And as far as those bugs go, Digital Extremes have been very vigilant about catching bugs and fixing bugs as quickly as possible, so you gotta give them credit. And I've gotta give Digital Extremes credit, just for this entire block of updates, because that's something that I love about Digital Extremes as a company. They listen to the players. They may not always do things that the players like, and that's balancing issues and stuff like that. You can't have, super OP Warframes. You can't blame them for trying to balance the game. But, if it's within reason, DE has always been really good characters and really listening to the community and really taking, their input seriously and implementing it into the game when they can. And that's something that really that really is obvious in these block of updates. But the Arcwing stuff, and along with the Arcwings, there's, 2 sets of Arcwings at release, as well as 2 sets of weapons for each of them. And there was one more set released more recently, I believe in 15.2 was the release of the 3rd set of Arcwing weapons. So it's something that doesn't have a lot of variety and a lot of replayability right now. There's not a whole lot of different types of missions. There's not a whole lot of weapons and variety as far as that goes. But I think the Arcwing has a lot of potential further down the road to be really awesome and really fun and really just tie in with everything that is Warframe. But anyways, going on to Limbo. Limbo was the new Warframe. You've seen me playing him throughout these last couple of missions through this quest line. I can't stand him. He has one of the weirdest crowd control abilities, in that he's basically a quote-unquote void wizard. His first ability is called Banish. He basically will take an enemy and banish them to another dimension so that they can't hurt you, but you can't hurt them for the duration of the ability. His second ability is Rift Walk or Void Walk, where he goes into this other dimension, and he can hurt enemies that have been banished. That's kind of the cool thing. And when he can do that, that kind of, and he can also, use Rift Walk to heal and regen shields and, kind of take stock of the situation. That's about his most valuable skill. His third skill is Rift Surge, which is used in conjunction with either Cataclysm, his ult, or Banish. It basically just does extra damage to anybody who's been banished to the alternate void dimension. Cataclysm, I think I've used at least a couple of times, basically makes a giant void bubble, in which instead of, you being stuck in the void for the duration of Rift Walk, or the enemy being stuck in the void for the duration of Banish, like we see right here, you can move in and out of the void as you need to, and this is handy for void, or for defense missions, where enemies actually have to get close enough to be able to shoot the pod, which can be very handy on on Tier 4 survival, not Tier 4 survival, Tier 4 defense and such stuff like that. So that's about the most handy ability he has. But I'm not a big fan of Limbo in general. I think he's weird, and none of his abilities really do, anything else. He's a weird character. Some people really like him. I'm not a big fan, But he does have some utility for late game. I will give him that. The Europa levels, they've been advertising this for a while in before Update 15, but they finally added the excavation missions and changed the maps in Europa to be ice and frosty kind of, what was advertised in the excavation event. I have trouble with that word sometimes. And so that was really cool. I love new maps. I love new areas. That's a lot of fun. It definitely breaks up the monotony of playing the same ship, Grenier Galleon level over and over and over again. Orokin sabotage gate missions are introduced, tiers 1 through, towers 1 through 4. And those are basically the gate crash missions where you have to go in, reverse the portal polarity, and then go back through, steal the key, sabotage the portal, blow it up, and then leave. And those weren't bad. I like those. Those introduced or reintroduced the Grenier twin boss, which is a good fight. I liked it, and as well as it introduced the new Lynx boss, the Corpus Walker, who's basically a miniature version of the Jekyll, who's the boss on Venus. He spawns turrets and shield drones, though, so it's a little bit of a different fight. And he seems a little faster. He's not quite as gigantic and clumbering like an AT-AT. But, so those missions were not bad. And as you can see here, I've been using for a little while the Opticore railgun, which is, it's an interesting gun. It's got an interesting fire mode. It's basically the Spartan laser from Halo, another Halo reference, imagine that. But the Opticore, you have to hold it down, you have to hold down the fire button, and as soon as it's fully done charging, it fires, period. You can't, it's not like a bow where you can hold it down. It makes the gun a little trickier to use, but it definitely throws in a little bit more variety, and it's a little bit more fun. It's an interesting gun to use. And then there's the Helicare, Grenier Mace, which I didn't use a whole lot. Stats-wise, it wasn't impressive. Apparently, it's a thrown weapon, though, so... Not a thrown weapon, but it's like the glaive, so... I'm not sure. Check it out. It did not impress me with stats, so I just leveled it up and threw it back in my inventory. But last but not... Oh, I'm sorry. Second to last... I'm sorry, I skipped syndicates. Sigils are the new cosmetic. You can wear them on the front and back. As you can see here, I've got one on my back now and on my front. They are just new things that you can wear to represent your alliances with certain groups, aka syndicates, which I'll get to in a minute, and different other groups, and to show off your mastery rank and your clan and your all kinds of different stuff into and related to Warframe and your accomplishments and stuff. It's pretty cool. I like them. I feel like they'll be simpler to produce for DE, so we should get more of them. They're not like the Syndanas, which I think are a little bit harder to program and make, whereas these are just things you slap on your Warframe and you're pretty much done. But still pretty cool, badge of honor. Last but not least is the syndicates and the weapon augments and the ability augments. These are probably the bane of Update 15. These will probably give DE and Warframe in general the hardest time. I know they were probably the biggest reason I kind of stopped playing for a while, and they were what I was most excited about when Update 15 first hit, and it's what I was least excited about after I realized kind of how they were going to work. Basically, syndicates there's 6 syndicates, and there's different alliances and enemies and opposed 2 groups, and you can join one and you get rewards for moving through the ranks. And those rewards come in to new sigils. You gain what's called standing for each syndicate, just basically by fighting and doing levels. It's a percentage of the affinity that you earn in the levels, which is pretty cool. And you use this standing to increase levels into the syndicates, as well as to purchasing these new sigils. because you get a basic sigil when you join, but then you get cooler and more advanced sigils as you upgrade in ranks, as well as weapon augments and ability augments for your Warframe. Now, weapon augments are for they're I feel like they tend to basically go towards, for both Warframes and weapons, underused abilities and underused weapons, weapons that don't get a whole lot of use and aren't very powerful. They get these really great mods that make them more. They give them more oomph and later levels, and give them more usability, basically. And that's the same thing for ability mods. Like, for example, I'm playing Banshee, and her third ability, Silence, is not really one of her best abilities. It basically is really only good for stealth. But the ability augment basically buffs the amount of finisher damage that you can inflict when you're in stealth, which is really handy, and it can be really handy in stealth missions, and it makes it a little better. Another example is Necros' Soul Punch. Soul Punch was just a damage knockback ability that you can do on enemies. It was not anything that's people ever really used. But now, if you have the Augment mod, you can actually revive people instantly from a distance. Granted, it does cost you the majority of your energy and shields and health, I do believe, actually. So it's a dangerous mod, but it can be useful in certain situations, depending on how much health and how much energy you have. But it gives a different edge to those abilities, and it can make them kind of more useful and more usable. And these are really expensive. Obviously, these augment mods are really expensive. They cost a lot of standing, and when these syndicates were originally released, not like nobody really had them. They were expensive. They were hard to get. They were a lot of platinum if you wanted to buy them off of somebody. And DE basically, over the next couple of patches and hotfixes, did everything in their power to make it even harder. Syndicates were just nerfed, and people found workarounds, and then they got nerfed again, and Warframes got nerfed, and levels got nerfed. Like, they were making this game unfucking playable. Excuse my language. But, they were just... And then, I don't know, I guess they just changed their minds. Finally, player feedback was strong enough. But those are all the hot topics for the original Update 15. Update 15.1 was not a huge update in itself. It was the heavy weapon buff. All the heavy weapons, all the slow weapons got a pretty substantial buff, which was about damn time, in my opinion. I don't really use a lot of heavy weapons, but I'm glad to see that, DE has given them some love, finally. And, of course, 15.1 comes with a hell of a lot of bug fixes and, optimization fixes and everything else. Fixes, and more fixes. And by the time 15.1 had come out, this was kind of the time when people finally started to kind of find workarounds for how long it was taking to get standing in these syndicates. Basically, the amount of standing that you got per level was like 1% of the affinity that you got. So if you get, 100 affinity, you got 1 standing in the syndicate whose sigil you're currently wearing. So it just took a lot of work. So people found the levels that were that gave the highest enemy spawns and the best the best rewards for the effort. And between update 15.0 question mark and 15.1, they reduced the amount of standing you got. The amount of standing you originally got was somewhere in the ballpark of for about 20 minutes worth of work, you got like maybe 5 to 7k standing, maybe. And after a couple of hot fixes and a couple of updates, it was down to closer to like 1.5k, and it was just ridiculous. You know, these sigils and these augment mods are worth, and the ability mods are worth 25k standing a piece. 20 minutes for 1.5k, that's a huge amount of time, and that's not including the time it's going to take you to get to that level of standing, to that level in the Syndicate to begin with. And that's if you ignore everything beforehand. It was just not, it wasn't endgame content. Like, that was their big claim when this stuff came out, is, oh, it's going to be endgame content. No, it's not endgame content. It's not challenging. It's not fun. It's just a grind. And this game is grindy enough as it is. DE does not need to be adding in more of a grind in here than what's already there for something like this. It's silly. Anyways, so in 15.1.1, the map Viver on Eris was a very popular place to farm XP. You'd get usually about 2,000 for about 20 minutes worth of work, because it was an interception mission, and the 4 interception points were really close together, and you could just you'd have one guy in each point, and you could almost see each other on each of the points. Like, that's how close it was. And you had tons of enemy spawns, and it was just a real nice farm. And what they did in 15.1.1 is that they moved the spawns so they were really far away from each other, so it was much harder to just camp them. And they also... Never mind, they didn't do that then. And they adjusted enemy spawns and stuff like that. They just did everything in their power to be like, hey, let's make this as difficult as possible without directly nerfing the amount of standing that you can get. But, I mean, they kind of were, but they were doing it in a sneaky, underhanded way. But 15.2, here's the real kicker. This is what, really, people were upset with the past updates, but this was, the icing on the shit icing on the cake. Basically, there was line-of-sight changes for Excalibur that had been, play-tested and implemented in an old update and then taken out really quick for Excalibur, for his Radial Blind. For people who don't know, Radial Blind is Excalibur's first ability, and it basically stuns. It's a CC ability. It stuns everybody in the radius for a couple of seconds. It's a really nice ability. It's really handy for late game stuff. It's a great ability. Everybody loves it. It's probably one of the best CC abilities in the game. And they implemented line of sight checks on it. Basically, before, you didn't have to see the enemy to flashbang. Well, it's basically a flashbang. You didn't have to see the enemy to blind them. You could blind people through a wall. You could blind people, who were behind, a big thing of boxes or something. You didn't need line of sight. And basically in 15.2, they implemented so that you had to be looking at, or the enemy had to be visible to you in order to flashbang them. You couldn't go through walls anymore. And that people flipped out. They also did that with a mag ability, Mag's Shield Polarize, which drains the shields of enemies in the range of the attack and increases the shields of allies, which made it very effective against Corpus, who were the enemy type on Viver. So again, not directly nerfing the amount of Syndicate standing that you can get, but in a way they do. Not directly, but they're making it harder to play the levels, which is a lot of fun. And of course, more Trinity nerfs, because, it's Wednesday. Better nerf Trinity. Also, more interception changes. They made it so instead of all of the points, A, B, C, D, being neutral at the beginning, they were actually owned by the enemy. So you had to capture them. So the enemy basically immediately started getting points as soon as the level started. Or as soon as... I think it's as soon as you start capping one, everybody... They start getting points. So that means the enemies get a little bit of a buff in the beginning, and it can be a little bit harder to kind of get those wheels cranking out initially. And 15.2 was also the Wrathbone, or the Wraithbone hammer, and the Velocitus. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The Wrathbone is the melee hammer. The Velocitus is the railgun for the arc wings. It's the third set of weapons for the arc wing stuff, and I'm so glad that they're getting more weapons and more variety for the Arcwing, because they really need it. It's got a lot of potential there, and a lot of replayability comes in trying new weapons and trying new weapon combinations. That being said, I'm not sure what happened between 15.2 and 15.2.2, but DE finally sees the error of their ways and reverts a lot of bad decisions that they've made in the last couple of updates. The biggest one is that syndicate growth is multiplied basically by 10, so you're gaining 10 times the amount of standing that you were when the updates first started, which makes standing much easier to get. However, they implement a standing cap. That is a cap of how much standing you can earn in one day. Which, and I know what a lot of you are thinking, like, oh, well, that's stupid, why would they do that? It's because you can earn, like, if they didn't put a cap on it, you would be able to earn a disgusting amount of standing. And the amount of standing that you can earn increases with your mastery rank, which makes it a little bit more like endgame content, because, you know, the higher master ranked you are, the more standing you can get per day, and it makes getting those mastery ranks actually worth it, because once you hit mastery rank like 9 or 10, you have everything. There's no point in advancing, except you can say you're master race 17, but fuck that, whatever. And it really does make it more of actual, like, end-game content, which is nice. And they also added sigil multipliers. These are basically if you buy a sigil that unlocks at like level 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in a syndicate group, you'll get a small standing bonus. So you'll earn like an extra 5% standing, or 8%, or 11%, depending... Oh, that's a beautiful... Oh, God, sorry. I forgot about that shot. Oh, beautiful. Gorgeous. Sorry. So you get a small bonus to your standing multiplier, depending on if you buy a sigil from later on in the syndicate ranks, which is something the game it should have shipped with. And I hate it when people use the, oh well, you know, they took out the helmet bonuses, so why would they have put bonuses on the sigils? Well, the sigils aren't combat related. This is literally just cutting down the amount of time you have to farm. It's not combat related. The helmets were combat related, and people were being forced to use a certain helmet in order to maximize a certain build. It's not the same thing at all. And another beautiful reset that they did is they took out the line of sight checks for Excalibur and Mag. These were a problem, again, in 15.2, and they changed it back to being you didn't need line of sight. And I think people freaked out about it. I think that was probably a big reason why all these changes happened, because people were hardcore protesting this in the game. Viver Eris is now actually a hive mission. Eris in general is an infested planet. It's an infested system, so it didn't really make a whole lot of sense that there were Corpus there to begin with, but it is now a hive level, which I'm alright with. Honestly, now that syndicate growth is increased so exponentially, you can do, Cerberus on Pluto again, which is a great level to farm affinity, and now to farm syndicate standing, so people could go back there and, keep on farming their keys, or whatever they're doing. So losing Viber isn't really that big a deal. As, of course, through all of these hotfixes and updates, there's, a whole lot of bug fixes and stuff like that. But basically, 15.2.2 was the holy grail. It was, the DE listening to player feedback and really deciding to, fix the syndicate problem. And now the syndicates are a lot more fun and a lot more playable. And they're just not as tremendous a grind. I mean, you're still gonna grind. Don't get me wrong. These syndicates are still a grind, but they're much more manageable a grind. I feel like you can play like an hour and a half a day, get your max, and that's if you're at level 17. At rank 17, you play an hour and a half a day, you get your max standing, and that's it. It makes it possible to actually have fun and enjoy these levels. And this aspect, not these levels, but this aspect of Update 15. And I thought the syndicates were a really good idea. Having that, kind of having the aspect of allies. You're not alone in the universe. It's not just you and your enemies. You do have allies. There are, good people among the people who are, not quite so evil in the Grenier and in the Corpus. And, there are civilians and there are, other, beings in the solar system. It's not just, the Tenno and the Grenier and the Corpus. And I think that's very cool, and I think they finally fixed the extremely broken system that is syndicates. But that brings us to 15.3, which released today, November 20th. And that basically introduced gifting, where you can gift items and platinum to other players. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can gift stuff now. You don't have to, before you pretty much exclusively had to trade stuff if you wanted to give somebody platinum or whatever. And now, if your friend, needs 20 platinum or whatever, you can just gift it to him really quick. It is something that should probably have been in the game before this. I think it's a pretty natural progression of things, especially with a free-to-play game with, a monetary, system like Platinum. It also introduced the new launcher, the new website with the new logo. The new logo looks very slick, it's very clean, I love it. Unfortunately, my thumbnails will not include it. It'll still be the old look. However, I'm going to work on getting that changed over ASAP, as quickly as possible. I think it looks really clean. Really, the website looks good. The launcher looks good. Very, very slick. Also, the Trinity Immortal skin. I guess this is what... I guess they gave this to people. They're like, oh, we're sorry we nerfed Trin so much. Here, spend platinum on a shitty-looking Immortal skin. Oh boy. Oh boy. Fun. But Jesus Christ, I think... excuse my language, but I think that's it. I think that'll be it for the episode of the Update 15 Megasode. I did not plan this episode going 35 minutes. I really didn't, I promise. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. For those of you who stayed the entire time, thank you. I appreciate it, which will be like 4 of you, of the, 200 people that'll probably see this. Thank you very much. And I will be bringing you more Warframe videos in the future. I'm back playing the game. Update 15 was part of the reason I stopped playing, but also another big reason I stopped playing was just that MMO fatigue. Everybody has it sometimes. You're playing WoW, you're playing, Rift, you're playing whatever, and you just get tired of it. You just can't do it anymore. And that was a big factor in, I would say, 50% of the reason I stopped playing Warframe for the last couple of weeks. But now with all these changes and everything else, I'm back in it, and I'm gonna, bring you guys more news and more stuff. I'll probably do an Arcwing episode to kind of flush out flush out those items a little bit more, and why I think Arcwing is such a cool addition to the game. I mean, because it is. I think everybody agrees with me on that. But you know, I just want to kind of, you know, fangirl out about it a little bit. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I appreciate it. The update 15 megasode. We will see you next time. Bye.